Welcome to Sports Beat KC, the Kansas City Star's daily sports podcast. It's Tuesday, March 31st, and I'm Blair Kerkhoff. Chiefs news marches on, and today, beat writer Herbie Teope and I discuss the latest developments, starting with the return of wide receiver Demarcus Robinson and the departure of linebacker Reggie Ragland. After a break, we get into more Chiefs moves and take a look at what might be the Chiefs' intentions during the NFL draft next month. So here we go with Herbie Teope. Herbie, do you have an extra $177 on you?
I don't know, but the Chiefs better have some overdraft protection.
I saw that figure the other day, and it's one of several figures that are estimated for the amount of money that the Chiefs have in their salary cap. A couple other numbers I saw are in the negative, but this one was to the good, $177, enough to pay your cable bill or your car insurance or whatever you're doing with $177. But we know that we knew that this was going to be an issue for the Chiefs through this free agency period. But how did they end up so close to the line, and where do they go from here? Because it's obviously you can't do anything with I don't think a player is going to sign for $177 next year.
Hey, fully guaranteed though, man, fully guaranteed.
I'll take it.
You can pay your Netflix bill for at least the next 6 months. It's a good question how they got here, but as you said, we knew this was going to happen, even coming into this. Well before we hit free agency, well before the regular season was over, a lot of forecasters were looking at this and saying they were not going to be heavily involved in free agency because they had some salary cap challenges. Now, they were able to finagle it. They got creative. This is one thing that Brett Veach has been saying ever since the NFL Scouting Combine, that they would have to get creative to navigate through their salary cap. And you saw some signings. They brought back Mike Pennell. They brought back Anthony Sherman. They brought back Demarcus Robinson. They were able to sign Mike Remmers, Antonio Hamilton, Chad Henne. Who am I forgetting here? I'm forgetting. Oh, and Jordan Ta'amu.
Yeah.
So they were able to navigate it. But now, because they haven't done anything else as far as restructuring other contracts, now you're in a bind here. And they're going to have to get creative sooner than later. Because one thing that you have to remember, that you got the draft here coming up in a month. And according to so many salary cap websites, they have to have at least $4.7 million to sign their draft class this year. So sooner or later, you're going to have to start taking a look at Sammy Watkins. You're going to have to look at Laurent Duvernay-Tardif. You're going to have to look at Anthony Hitchens. What can we do with these contracts that count so much against the salary cap where we can restructure it or outright cut them and gain some cap space? They need cap space in a hurry.
Yeah, so it has to happen before the draft. I mean, I guess I don't know the exact timetable of between draft and then signing, but isn't there? I would imagine there's some NFL rule that says once you better have the money in the bank to enter the draft. I mean, the Chiefs are going to have to come up with at least that amount of money that you talked about before the draft hits, which is in April, fourth week in April.
Yeah, April the 23rd through the 25th. Now, here's the deal: you can still have the draft. From my understanding, you can still have the draft because they have to put their name on the piece of paper. They have to sign that thing for their contract. And as you recall, and during the offseason, the rookie mini camps, et cetera, a lot of players still aren't signed yet, but they will participate in the rookie mini camp. And we don't even know if they're going to have a rookie mini camp this year because of the coronavirus pandemic that's going on around the world. A lot of offseason workout programs may get pushed back. We may see some instances where there's an abbreviated form of organized team activities, also known as OTAs, or maybe even pushed back to the start of training camp. But the bottom line here is for the Chiefs, because as of right now, by my numbers, they have 69 people on the offseason roster. You include the 5 draft picks. Now, don't forget, you also have a slew of undrafted free agents that the Chiefs will probably bring aboard. And you have to have a kiddie pool available for training camp to deal with the inevitable injuries. You're going to see some signings during training camp. But as of right now, $177 ain't going to do it.
And they could spread that out, don't you think? All right, so one of the players you mentioned is Demarcus Robinson, the wide receiver, who agreed to a deal with the Chiefs. What I thought was interesting, I read this, and like others that the Chiefs have signed, the Chiefs benefit from a relatively new rule about veterans, how much how much of their contract counts against the cap. It's almost like a bit of a discount. About $1 million of Demarcus Robinson's new deal counts against the cap because of some new NFL rule.
Yeah, the CBA. That was the key thing. Everything took effect once the player union ratified the CBA. A lot of those rules took effect now. So there goes the part about being creative. You were able to sign a Demarcus Robinson back because he's not going to count so much against the cap this year. Interesting thing with Demarcus Robinson is his sources tell me that he did receive a lot of interest out there on the open market. But, he decided to come back to the Chiefs. I'm sure he would have got paid more out there, but this helps the Chiefs when you bring back a guy like Demarcus Robinson. You don't have to worry about addressing wide receiver in this year's draft. Well, you might want to do it, but not necessarily early, if you get what I'm saying here, because now you've got your top 4 guys back. You've got Tyreek Hill, Watkins, depending on what happens with his contract. You've got McCole Hardman, and as we know, Andy Reid has been saying since the combine, this guy is a starter. So if they do lose Watkins, now you got Hardman who can slide into that starting spot there along with Robinson.
And still have Byron Pringle on the roster. I don't know what his future is, but he's a player that the Chiefs have liked and they've given him some snaps. Special teams guy. He was on the receiving end of one of Patrick Mahomes' most artistic touchdown passes this year against the Colts, the crazy scramble, and Pringle, I think it's his only NFL touchdown reception. So you're right. The position group seems okay. And I think as we have established over the last 2 years, Mahomes tends to make whoever he's throwing to look better. He's just, I think a lot of people would want to play that position with the Chiefs because of the prospect of playing with Patrick Mahomes. But a little bit more on DeMarcus, since we haven't talked about him since the last time we talked. Last year, 32 receptions, career high, 449 yards, also a career best. 4 touchdown receptions matches his career high. And Herbie, you had not joined us when DeMarcus turned in his best game of the year. It was in week 2 out at Oakland, where he had 172 yards of receptions and a couple of touchdowns, and most of those came in one quarter. It was the second quarter. It was incredible. And I looked this up. I didn't realize this. Because of the injuries to Tyreek Hill, the injury to Tyreek Hill, and McCole Hardman was a rookie, and just some other factors, Demarcus Robinson had the second most snaps among wide receivers this year at 735. And if you throw in his 66 special team snaps, he was on the field more than any Chiefs wide receiver this season. So, and he's a guy, as you said, I think could have been a recipient of the Super Bowl bounce, and of a value, an increased value based on, being associated with a Super Bowl winning team. Others, I'd heard the Packers might have been interested, the 49ers, the Giants at one time, but I think the Chiefs thought enough of Demarcus Robinson to, give him bring him back and give him the deal. I think the Chiefs see value in Demarcus Robinson. I
believe they absolutely do. And, not outside of the stats, he meant a lot as well, blocking downfield. Robinson was a good blocker, a good blocking wide receiver. And when you look at the players that the Chiefs did bring back, Chad Henne, obviously he's not going to start over Patrick Mahomes barring an injury. But you look at your Mike Pinnells, your Anthony Shermans, and your Robinsons. These are the guys who had a niche and a specific role on the team. And you can't win Super Bowls without solid role players. And that trio right there certainly fit that bill. I think with Robinson, he brings that familiarity. And from his point of view, last year was a contract season. But unfortunately, he happened to have a contract season in this year's draft class, which is widely touted and widely regarded as the best wide receiver class in decades. So he had that unfortunate thing going against him, which is why you've seen such a slow market for wide receivers in free agency, because a lot of teams are looking at this year's draft class saying we don't need to spend big on wide receivers. We can draft a guy this year and just be responsible for that rookie contract. And then once that rookie contract expires, then the guy can get his money. I think with Robinson this year, if you produce the numbers in what is now a contract year, and then next year when the wide receiver draft class isn't so great, now he can go out there and get paid. He's still young.
Yeah. Those are great points, and I loved what you said about his blocking ability. That is absolutely underappreciated about Demarcus Robinson. He's a player. He's a good locker room guy and gets along with everybody there. He's and on the field, he really is a whatever it takes to get the job done sort of wide receiver. He's also been a guy who I've noticed when Mahomes is in trouble, when he scrambles around, because Robinson isn't often a first or second option, he ends up finding Robinson. Defenders leave whoever they leave Robinson to go cover Hill or Kelsey, and there's Demarcus open. And I think some of his biggest plays in a Chiefs uniform have come on what we used to think of as broken plays, but Patrick Mahomes has changed the definition of what a broken play is. So, yeah, listen, it's a good signing for the Chiefs, and another player that we have not been able to talk about yet is someone who has signed somewhere else, and that's linebacker Reggie Ragland. Now, Ragland signed with the Lions, and this is a guy who came to the Chiefs with high expectations before the 2018 season. He had come off an injury. He did not play for the Bills and was injured. Chiefs thought they were getting a really good player in Reggie Ragland, but Ragland only played 235 defensive snaps this year, fourth among the linebackers. And that was way down. That was less than half of what he produced in 2018. But I will say this. He did start the Super Bowl. He was the Chiefs started 3 linebackers against the 49ers, and he was one of them. So what are the Chiefs? Why would the Chiefs have made the decision not to re-sign Reggie Ragland?
I think, if anything, when you look at Ragland's snaps, he's widely regarded as a stout run stuffer. He's very stout against the run. But where the Chiefs had issues last year, even when Ragland eventually returned to the starting lineup, we're against receivers coming out of the backfield, your tight ends, especially your running backs. The one that really sticks out to me is Austin Eckler, 100 yards receiving against the Chiefs down there in Mexico City. But it wasn't just that 100-yard game. It was, as you look at the running backs, what running backs gave the Chiefs the most fits, it was the receiving type running backs. And Ragland is a very good player against the run. No ands, if, buts about it. But the Chiefs were in their base 4-3 defense 9 of the 16 games last year. So 7 of those games, they had to go to a nickel package. When you go to a nickel package, that means just 2 linebackers on the field, and that was Hitchens and Damian Wilson. And so Ragland was relegated to the sidelines. I think the Chiefs, by letting Ragland go, are signaling, look, we're going to be in the market for a linebacker that can cover. And at the Combine, that was one of my stories at the Combine where I wrote about that, where this year's draft class, once again, it's a deep draft class, but there are a lot of linebackers in this year's draft class who can play the pass as well. I think of when I talked to Virginia linebacker Jordan Mack, he just says overall, I think I'm a great coverage linebacker, and the ability to cover means you're on the field more. And he's absolutely correct.
I think of maybe the biggest plays that Ragland made in a Chiefs uniform. He had the fumble return for a touchdown against the Broncos this year, the game in which Mahomes was injured, and the defense just played lights out great at Denver. And 2 years ago, he had an end zone interception of Tom Brady in the AFC Championship game. So Reggie Ragland, not without his contributions in a Chiefs uniform, just not the player I think that the Chiefs envisioned when they acquired him.
Yeah, going back to that Denver game, if you remember that, the Broncos started off the year on a losing streak, and then all of a sudden I think they put together like 2 or 3 wins leading up to that game, and it was because of Philip Lindsay. Philip Lindsay was on a nice little running tear there along with Royce Freeman. And so you put Ragland in there, and they shut down the run, and they forced Joe Flacco to become one-dimensional, and that really helped them out to win that game. So
right.
It goes back to You need a linebacker, and I think the Chiefs know this. You got to have a guy who can be on the field all the time and not just for situations. And I think that's what they're probably going to be looking for.
Okay, Herbie, let's take a quick break. And when we come back, there's a couple more players who there've been some movement with that you and I haven't had a chance to talk about, and we'll do that right after this. Hey, it's Blair. Hey, we have a special subscription offer for SportsBeat KC listeners, unlimited digital access to the Kansas City Star's award-winning sports coverage. Sign up now for 1 year of Sports Pass for access to all the sports news, features, and columns we have to offer. And it's only $30. That's a 40% savings off our regular rate. For your convenience, your subscription will automatically renew after the initial term at $50 unless you tell us to cancel. A lot of subscription services won't tell you that. They'll just sneak it on there. We just told you. Your subscription helps support the sports coverage of kansascity.com and the Kansas City Star. Please visit kansascity.com/sportsbeatkc offer to get this special offer. And as always, thanks for listening. Back with Herbie Teope, who covers the Chiefs on a daily basis for the Star. Herbie, we talked a week ago today, which is Tuesday, and in the morning, and then later that day, or I think it was actually in about 8 o'clock at night, the Chiefs announced they had signed Mike Pennel and Anthony Sherman. And that day, or maybe it was the next day, we found out that Blake Bell, the tight end, was moving on to the Dallas Cowboys. I don't think either of us was surprised about the bringing back Pennel and Sherman. But Blake Bell kind of surprised me a little bit. Essentially, he picked the Cowboys over the Chiefs. And does this change the Chiefs' draft approach when it comes to the tight end position?
I don't believe so, because I think when I think of Blake Bell, and I wrote about their Tiger personnel package, their two tight end set. He was a key component of that, but his skill set is more blocking. I think when you look at the Chiefs' current crop of tight ends, you still have Deion Yelder, you still have Nick Keiser, and Elise Mack. Don't forget about this guy. I mean, he was a former 7th-round draft pick for the New Orleans Saints just 2 seasons ago. So you've got competition there. And when you've got competition, Yelder knows the scheme. Nick Keiser, being on the practice squad the entire year, now knows the scheme. Elise Mack is known more for his receiving capabilities. I think they have enough competition there where they'll be able to find a guy. They don't need to go out there and draft a tight end early. Now, if you want to bolster competition, by all means, but you don't have to do it early. Okay.
And then with Pennel and Sherman, kind of no-brainers there, weren't they?
Yeah, absolutely. Sherman, obviously, how can you not bring the guy back? And of all the NFL teams around the National Football League, I can probably count on one hand teams that still rely on the fullback. The Chiefs obviously are going to be up there, and Sherman, because what he means not just on offense as the blocking back, but he's a core special teams player. He means so much to this team. Pennel was also a no-brainer because the Chiefs' run defense took off last year once Pennel was finally inserted as a main piece of that interior rotation.
Okay, so coming up later today, and this is something I guess we can talk about down the road, the owners, the NFL owners are meeting via teleconference like everyone else is these days, and they're going to expected to approve the expanded playoff bracket. So NFL playoffs will go from 6 teams in each conference to 7. We've talked about it a little bit. Only the overall number 1 in each conference will get the bye. 2 through 7 will play to on the first weekend of the playoffs. So that means if this had been in effect last season, the Chiefs would have played an opening round game or a wild card game, and it's the Baltimore Ravens. Instead of the Ravens and the Chiefs having the first weekend off, it would have just been the Ravens. I understand the need to do this, and this also came out of the CBA discussions, did it not? That the NFL owners are just looking for a way to add revenue at a time when they're going to be spending more on expanded rosters and other just other expenses on the ownership side.
Yeah. It makes sense in a lot of ways. The NFL is continuing to grow. It's a runaway multi-billion-dollar cash cow for all the league owners. for all the broadcast deals they signed. So why not give the people what they want? The fact that it passed was amazing to me. I just didn't think that it would, especially now that, you're expanding it to a 17-game season, not necessarily this year, but, maybe as early as 2021. So,
Right.
there's obviously an appetite for football. I think it's going to change a lot the way teams approach the end of the year, where you see teams that clinch, they'll tend to rest their starters. Now you're going to see a lot of people knowing that the only bye you're going to get is if you have the number one. So you're going to see a lot more competitive games towards the end of the year.
Yeah, think about this past year for the Chiefs. I was thinking about this: 16 regular season games over 17 games season. Like everybody gets they get a bye week at some point in there. The Chiefs came late because it came after the Mexico City game, and then they get another bye week because of their standing in the AFC entering the playoffs. So. And then play 3 playoff games. So it's if you throw in the preseason, that's 23 games played over what amounts to 25, 26 weeks. And it's a lot of football for sure. And with the 17 game schedule that I think you're right is coming down the pike for 2021, there will not be an additional open week, from what I understand. They'll still just have the one bye. I may be wrong about that. Maybe that's still open to discussion, but that's it's a lot of football to play in. And I know one of the issues the players had was especially the veteran players, didn't like the idea of a 17 game regular season, but ownership won that one. They want more revenue. They're going to get more revenue, and that's what the CBA is about. Everybody feels that they got to give and take a little bit, and so that this is what's going to happen. I guess one of the other discussion points with the owners is what networks will carry these games, and I think CBS and NBC are going to be the winners in that realm. So the other thing I was wondering, how many times has if this 7-game playoff bracket had been applied in history, how many times would a team with a losing record have been in the playoffs? And NFL.com did the research for us and found that only once would a 7th seeded team have entered the playoffs with a losing record since 1990, which was the year that the playoffs expanded from 10 to 12 teams. So I thought that was interesting.
Yeah, and there have been examples of teams with losing records winning their divisions. Most recently, the Seahawks a couple of years ago, they were 7-9 or something like that. So if anything, you know what? Give the people. It goes back to, again, give the people what they want. They want football. Give them football.
There you go. And I remember the Broncos, the Tim Tebow Broncos, won the division with an 8-8 record just a few years back as well. So it does happen, and the NFL, even with the expanded playoffs, with 14 teams in the playoffs starting next season, will still be behind the NHL and the NBA in terms of percentage of its teams that qualify for the postseason. The NFL or the NBA and the NHL are over 50%. More than half of their teams play in the postseason. The NFL will still be under 50%. So, look, the best teams are still going to be playing for in the NFL playoffs. Herbie, what you have got a mock draft coming up, probably one of several. What are you thinking these days for the Chiefs as you start preparing for NFL mock drafts?
I'm glad you actually brought that up.
Because you had forgotten all about it.
Here's my thought process on mock drafts, okay? Because when I used to do them, first off, I'll be honest, I hate mock drafts, okay? And there's a reason why. It's because too many people put too much stock in them. A mock draft, there is absolutely zero science to it. I think when you look at the people who do it the most, they even are wrong. Because the beauty is forever in the eyes of the beholder. The way I approach mock drafts is I look at positions. I don't necessarily look at a player. I look at positions, what makes sense. And then I go into explaining why this position makes sense in this round, etc. So, and then if I put a player there, just get this is an opportunity to get to know about a player. Not necessarily, hey, Herbie Teope says the Chiefs are going to draft so-and-so. That's not what this exercise is about. It's what makes sense to me. And that's the key thing that I think when people read mock drafts, they lose sight of. I'm not gunning for 100% correctness here, because nobody's going to get 100%. I challenge anyone out there that does mock drafts for a living. Show me where you were more than 10% correct. That's the bottom line with mock drafts for me. I think it's a good exercise getting to know a player. And so if the Chiefs do draft him, or if a team does draft him, now you know all about him. When I used to do this when I was on the Saints beat, I actually got maybe one or two players correct. But, readers were able to understand why I picked that position.
I don't think anything has changed from what we have discussed since the end of the season. That cornerback is still it's one of the positions of need for the Chiefs, and we wouldn't be surprised if that was the first player taken for the Chiefs is someone at that position. What are the other two? What else would you put up there in terms of priority? So if the corner that they want is off the board, but they really like a guy at this position, we might see him picked. What position is that?
Well, I think that you can go a slew of positions here. It's also going to depend if they go with the best player available. That's the other thing too. That's always going to be the key thing in the draft. I think cornerback, you mentioned there, that's got to be at the top of their priority list, because I know they brought in Antonio Hamilton, but his niche is on special teams. Bashad Breeland is still floating out there in free agency. Surprisingly to me that he doesn't have a market. But if they somehow cannot bring him back on $177, you got to draft a cornerback. And this year's draft class has quite a few good quality players who can be plug-and-play options. I think with the 32nd overall pick, that's what you got to be on the lookout for. Who can immediately come in here and contribute? Outside of that, I'm probably going linebacker, because they need a coverage linebacker. I'm probably going offensive line. Mike Remmers, even though they signed him, he's no spring chicken. He's going to be entering his 9th season. Mitchell Schwartz is getting up there in age. Eric Fisher is getting up there in age. Sooner or later, you're going to have to draft a tackle who can be a swing type option. I think running back has to be on the menu here. The Chiefs, as we know, spent a lot of time doing formal interviews with running backs at the NFL Scouting Combine. And once again, I want to reemphasize to the listeners out there, this year teams could only do 45 formal interviews, down from 60. So if you're spending 45 interviews, part of those 45 interviews with a certain position group, that's got to be on. You got to think that's got to be on the menu here.
Hey, that's another point, Herbie, that as we wind down, I wanted to ask you about is this year obviously is different for so many reasons for the Chiefs, for the NFL overall, and for the Chiefs in particular. The Chiefs, getting to and winning the Super Bowl. And now in the COVID-19 pandemic that we're in, that has ended it, pro days and physicals and other types of scouting that would happen right now in the NFL. I got to think the teams that are most organized, that did their homework in advance, that really scouted the heck out of Senior Bowl and did the things that that did your due diligence, I guess, are going to take advantage of the current situation. My question is, because the Chiefs were so tied up in postseason, NFL postseason this year, were they able to approach the offseason with the same type of energy and commitment that they have in previous years?
I think absolutely. What people need to understand too, the scouting doesn't start at the end of a college football season. It starts during the season. I can remember going out there to my alma mater when they would let me up there in the press box. You would see Chief scouts in there. At the beginning of the year, you have your area scouts who are going around the entire country attending football games as the NFL regular season is going on, because that's their primary mission. I remember after the Chiefs clinched the conference championship game, when Brett Veach was in the locker room, as you recall, I specifically asked him, hey, the Senior Bowl is next week. You're going to be preparing for the Super Bowl. Who's going to be at the Senior Bowl? And he basically said, hey, we'll have a presence there. That's part of the scouting process. Veach may not have necessarily gone to Mobile, but his personnel staff was out there. So I think they haven't lost anything as far as the scouting process is concerned, with the exception of the lack of pro days, with the lack of pre-draft visits, because you're allowed 60 of those.
Right.
You're allowed 30 of those. But the pre-draft visits are more for if you have follow-ups on medical issues, if you have follow-ups on juniors who did not attend the Senior Bowl or were not invited to the Combine. That's what the pre-draft visits are for. Or if you have follow-ups on guys you spoke to at the Combine, now you want to bring him in for a face-to-face for the entire day. The NFL has dealt with this by allowing teams to have FaceTime interviews with players. There's a lot of pros and cons to that, and to me, in my opinion. You do get a chance to still talk to these prospects, which is the pro. I think the con to that is you don't have the advantage of watching body language. Because when you're doing video conference calls, the camera is located right smack on my face. You don't see what the rest of my body is doing if you're asking me an uncomfortable question. How am I reacting to that? And I think that's where the part that gets lost in it. But as far as the overall draft process, it'll be a challenge for teams like the Chiefs because you don't have the 2 months before the draft of pro days and pre-draft visits and pre-draft workouts. But as far as scouting and identifying players, I think that process is taken care of because that thing started at the beginning of the college football season.
All right, gotcha. And it's, as of right now, the Chiefs just with the 5 draft picks and really not in any position to waste any of them this year. So, all right, Herbie, great stuff. Always enjoy it, and we'll catch up again next week. Well, that'll do it for today. Thanks for listening, and thanks to the production team of Derek Donovan, Savannah Smith, Randy Mason, Beth Welsh, Jeff Rosen, and Chris Fickett. Links to the stories we discussed are in the show notes. Follow the coverage of the Chiefs and all of Kansas City sports in the Star and on kansascity.com. And nobody is bringing you better regional coverage of the COVID-19 coronavirus pandemic than kansascity.com. We'll be back on Wednesday with another Sports Beat KC where we talk sports in Kansas City every day.